and Jan sort of organised it all and got everyone together, organised the rehearsals, told us, you know, and being Jan, we had our first rehearsals around Easter 1980, right? So around April, or I can't remember exactly when. And he announced very early on that he'd booked us a concert at the beginning of June in London. And I said, but hang on a minute, we haven't even learned how to play the gamelan yet. We want to do a concert. But he was like that. He really wanted to get things going. And I thought, oh my goodness, so... But it was booked. We couldn't get out of it. So we said, well, we'll just have to do this concert. So we learnt pieces quickly, you know, whatever pieces I knew, which wasn't many. I mean, I'd played maybe 15, 20 pieces, but I couldn't say I knew how all of them went. I felt confident with about 4 or 5, and I thought, yeah, I could probably do the notation and explain to people. But that's why we also put in some like music from the West that was influenced by gamelan, piano pieces, and why we also started composing. That's the interesting thing. Well, I remember, you see, because it was, I've told people this story, that it was an element of panic, because I was sitting at home one day thinking, right, this concert's coming up in about just over a month's time or something, and I was looking down at what I thought we could do in it, and I thought, yeah, even if we do this big Gending Bonang and play it many times, we can't make it last more than half an hour, and that's not long enough for even half a concert, so we've got to get more pieces. I thought, I don't know anymore. I'm not confident with anything else. So I'm just going to have to compose one. So, well, that piece that I did then was only half composition, to be honest. It was called, being a bit pretentious, so I'll give it an Indonesian sort of title, called it Gending Campur. Not because it was mixed up with Western stuff, because it didn't really have anything to do with Western music. It was more that it was mixing up idioms and both tunings and things. But I also tried to do it as a kind of very simple, you know, this young person's guide to the orchestra thing. So people are always saying, well, what happens if you try and introduce gamelan? Works very well in Balinese music, of course, because you can have a gongkebia and then the rayon can do a little bit and the gangsa can do a bit and everyone can take their turn, the drums do a bit. But of course, as you know, Javanese gamelan, they all play together. They don't sort of have little solos and things. So it was done where you were building up a piece by bringing in one instrument after another so people could hear what the different patterns were. And it was as simple as that. But just something to do and use it to explain to the audience that you'll be able to hear how gamelan is built up. And then other composers in the group started saying, well, we'll do some proper compositions, and so we started getting more like that. So we were always mixing our own pieces with some traditional repertoire. Yeah.
Where were you performing the first time with it? It
was in Highgate, in Lauderdale House, which is on, is that called Highgate Hill? You know, you go up from Archway up to Highgate, and on the left, not a very big building, but quite a nice, pleasant sort of building backing onto the park, but just on the edge of Highgate. And again, Jan found that venue, or somebody in the group found it, I don't know. And so
and then were you touring after that?
Then we did, I think we did the Edinburgh Festival. Can you believe this? I mean, I know, I think that was the same summer, because Jan again was just coming and saying, well, now I've booked the Edinburgh Festival. The Fringe, of course, not the real, not the main festival. But Queen's Hall, I think it's called Queen's Hall or something in Edinburgh. It's a lovely building. And we thought, wow, this is fantastic. We're only on the Fringe, we're not the main festival, but they're giving us this beautiful hall. And we did a couple of concerts there. I think we were there for 4 or 5 days or something. But I can't remember exactly, that might have been the next one, but Jan was just so active in getting concerts all over the place that we ended up being this sort of crazy touring group who were just driving around the country doing gamelan concerts all over the place, you know. and they did some in Scotland and well, of course Edinburgh, but he was just getting them wherever. I can't remember the list offhand, but kept us very busy.
Fast process.
It was scarily fast. Yeah.
Is it funding involved?
No, that's a good question. I think that no, there wasn't. But I think we just expected to pay for ourselves to get to London because, of course, some of the group lived in London, quite a few in the sort of Birmingham area, Jan and his friends, and I probably had about the furthest to come, or maybe Alec was still in Durham, but so mostly it was quite easy. So we just thought, well, we have to get our own fares to London and find some friends to stay with, because we'd be there for we'd always rehearse Saturdays and Sundays, so we'd stay overnight. And the only funding was when we had concerts, and Jan would sort of get some sort of small fee and the expenses.
Because you need to transport the gamelan.
We need to transport the gamelan. And of course the embassy was so helpful because they almost let us use the gamelan as though it belonged to us. I mean, but then no one else was using it as far as I know. I don't think I had anyone else. It was all down in the basement of the embassy, so not the nicest part of the building. And we were just allowed to go there and spend the weekend in the basement of the Indonesian embassy. But a lot of the members were musicians' unions, so that meant that they had to be paid a certain minimum fee for a concert or something like that. And I think we all ended up joining the union because there was pressure to do that. But there was no regular funding otherwise. We didn't have sponsors or anything like that. As far as
how long was the group active for?
3 years, just over, 3.5, because it culminated with a big tour in 1983 when the Arts Council Contemporary Music Network, which I think still goes on, I don't know, I think they're still active, but it was a very big thing then. And again, Jan or somebody in the group managed to get us a tour with this Contemporary Music Network, which was amazing because that was almost the best thing that a new music group could expect in this country. You think you get a tour on that, everything is looked after. They organise all the accommodation, all the transport, fees, everything. And we had to do about, probably about 6 or 7 concerts, I can't remember the exact number, over a couple of weeks, and again, all around the country. And the BBC recorded one of them, and but at that time, Alec had been to Indonesia and spent some time there and had made a lot of friends and so on. And I don't think anyone else had really been there by then, just me and Alec, I think, had actually been to Java and done so. But they said, oh, if we're going to do this tour, it has to be a lot better. And we got to be a bit more sort of ambitious and try and do things properly and do some proper gending with all the instruments. And we arranged to get, oh Lord, now was it 5 musicians from what is now Isi Solo, the usual place, you know, everyone studied. And I think it was, and they're all famous people like Panga. Sri Hastanto was still in the country, I think he's doing his PhD at Durham. And then Sukamso and Supardi, the Bonang player and maestro, and who was the other one? Oh gosh, if I forget one, I remember the others. That looks terrible. It'll come to me, but I'm sure there were 5 of them. Because before then, I have to admit that if people had known what a gamelan was really like, they might have said, well, what we were offering was very basic, it has to be said, because you know that the so-called front instruments and all the more difficult things, and the singing, Gandera, Rabab, you know, all those gambang, these things, we hadn't really been able to do much with them because I didn't feel I could play any of them well enough in public. I'd played gambang a bit before in various groups in America, but not serious. So when they came, of course, they could bring in all the sort of gundares and rhubarb and everything.
When were they coming?
They came in, well, they came over just for this tour, which was in October 1983. So they came over in, I think in September. We started rehearsing again at the embassy near the end of September. We had a lot of rehearsals. And yeah, they must have stayed here for about a month or so and then gone back to Java, except probably Hastantu, who was still at Durham. So it was by far our best set of concerts then, because 5 Javanese musicians with us. It was nearly half the group were actual expert players, so it did make a big difference. But it wasn't a fantastically ambitious program. We did Gambit Sawit, which a lot of groups do now without thinking twice, and a lot of new compositions again. And when that happened, there was this feeling that, in a way, it was a bit like the Durham Oriental Music Festivals, that it didn't need to carry on because other groups had started emerging. Because you see, by 1983, if you think we started in 1980, there's nothing happening, absolutely nothing going on. By 1983, this had arrived here, Durham had got their gamelan, Cambridge had, I think, might have got theirs by then. It was, if not, it was very imminent. Oxford came a couple of years later, so, but already, 3 or 4 other groups were able to start up. And so I'd already been running a group here for at least a year by the time that festival tour happened. And there are various, shall we say, personality issues by then, and the interesting dynamics of a gamelan group. If they stay together for a long time, they may really gel and work really well, or the tensions might get more and more and eventually it explodes. And there were lots of different philosophies in that group, different outlooks on life and music. I shouldn't say too much, but I do remember some of us feeling slightly perplexed, shall we say, that there was one concert I'll never forget. It was in Southall, and it was in a school. It was a lovely place. But I remember that we used to have all these business meetings. There were so many things to discuss about, how much we were getting paid, where we had to rehearse, what things we did. And they'd become very, very long meetings. And I remember that particular one, that it seemed to go on the whole afternoon. And about 5 o'clock or whenever it was, I can't remember exactly, but I said, look, hang on a minute, we haven't rehearsed for tonight's concert, we really shouldn't be doing this, we should be rehearsing. And I thought, this is crazy, why, we're getting things, priorities are going a bit wrong. So various people were thinking, oh, no, this isn't working very well. But it was largely for the other reasons I'd given. And Alec used to explain it very well, because people said, well, why did the English Gamelan Orchestra, it had just done this big tour, it was very successful, it must have been really pleased with itself, just at the beginning of something big, and at that point it stops and disbands and completely breaks up. And he said, oh, well, it's the victim of its own success, because so many things had happened. And I honestly think that it was mostly through that, probably, that we ever got the gamelan here. Because I'd been asking them for 8 years to get a gamelan every summer. They say, what would you like? What equipment do you want? And I said, don't ask, I don't want anything else. I want a gamelan, don't ask about how many paper clips I need or anything. It's just, And they said, oh, no, we can't have a gamelan, it's too expensive. And where do we keep it? And who's going to teach it? And everything like that. And then suddenly it happened. And we'd had... I think we must have had a concert by English Gamelan Orchestra, must have done a concert right here. And the message must have come across that there was a gamelan happening in the country, and English people, British people were playing gamelan. It didn't have to be Indonesians, it could happen.